Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone seeking to survive as a Pilates instructor. So, I just have one title today, and it's in response to Renee's enthusiasm about hearing me make comment about breathing. And so the first thing on my notes is to make a disclaimer, because it's such a huge subject. All I'm trying to do in this broadcast is to highlight some of the comments I've got about breathing from the MMP point of view. Okay? And so breathing, to try to put it in some kind of context, it helps to back up and say, all right, this is a broadcast for Pilates instructors, how to help them survive, and it's within the view of Michael Miller Pilates, which is an ideal view of the method. And that view any view really can start with Joseph Pilates and the name of his method, which is contrology. So when you start talking about breathing, I would bring up the subject of contrology and control, and the target of control being what the method's about. And so when it comes to breathing, control and controlling the breathing, or not controlling it, depending on how you do that, is definitely an issue. Remember, from the MMP point of view, Pilates is about Joseph Pilates as a survivor, creating a method of survival training, conditioning, and that assumes reality. That assumes that our survival is discernible by whether you're alive or dead, and that we're trying to stay on the live part of that discernment. All right, so from contrology we get is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Any or all of the Pilates culture can at least knows, I think that's in the book as a definition. Maybe not. A lot of people don't even know there is a book. Don't even know there was a man. It's always embarrassing in my presentations sometime when someone comes up to me or in my session and says, "Who's Joe?" See, so we go from contrology and its definition to Michael Miller Pilates' interpretation of spirit as observing. And so in terms of controlling your breath at the level of survival, right, surely I've read and seen movies, but never really been in the situation myself, where I was afraid that if I was heard breathing, I would be discovered and things would not go well, right? I'm trying to survive. I'm trying not to be heard. So you cannot just stop breathing for very long, so you have to control your breathing. And that's one of the first things that you learn in the military, is that you have to control your breathing. And so breathing is about survival, and two examples, certainly not limited to those two. Being heard as a matter of, if your breathing is heard, it could mean your survival. If your breathing isn't controlled, other than just heard, if it has to happen. You know what I mean. Now, thousands of years ago, there are petroglyphs that show spirals that some interpretations make them to be whirlwinds, dust storms that are common in the area geographically. So they're capturing what they see in the whirlwind in the spiral on the rock. And after all, it's a long time ago, and not knowing where whirlwinds come from, but knowing that the wind of the breath is so critical, and knowing that without breath, you don't survive, right? So breathing is definitely a survival thing, and it's definitely a life thing, and it's something in a way like lightning, if you're thinking of windstorms, in that they come from out of nowhere and then they disappear. So there's deep symbolization in spirals representing whirlwinds, which is air, which is what we breathe, which is equated to life, right? And so there's an acknowledgement of breathing, if you will, as some kind of connection to life force. I think I'm hurrying. So breathing is the great on-ramp to accomplishing the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. The great on-ramp. It means if you're aiming for trying to have your client have that sensation, presuming that there's a sensation that you're aiming for, and that's all MMP, right? Because maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but outside of MMP, but within MMP, you know, you've listened to this, the target is the experience. And the great on-ramp to the experience is breathing. Because breathing is something that you can listen to. Breathing is something that you can observe. And in the observation, coordinate it with movement. It's the great on-ramp. It isn't the whole highway, right? So I'm teaching in a studio. It's a busy day. There's a lot of people. They're all extreme cases because I'm far, far away, and Pilates was very new. And the newer Pilates is, and word travels, the more extreme the range of hope that comes looking for whatever they're hoping for, which is out of the dilemma they're in, which is a lot of times pain, but it sometimes is lack of uniformity and structure from birth. And so in the light of all those kind of sessions, I think I had 14 that day. No way, couldn't have. Maybe 10. Anyway, while teaching, a gentleman shows up using 2 daughters, it turns out, as crutches, and a third sort of helping along independently. And when his session came up, he used his crutches to come to the Cadillac and sort of sat on the edge of the Cadillac. in a despondent, there's a good word, a despondent attitude in physical carriage and being. And I said, hi, and I'm the guy from another part of the world, and I got around to, what can you do? I said, well, how are you, or what's the deal with you? And he said, well, I've had a stroke. I said, and I can barely walk, and I can't use one arm. And he's looking at me sort of out of dim eyes with more that he was coerced, maybe by the daughters, to come to see if I could help. And I don't know that I did at all, except for maybe in the one moment when I says, okay, you can move one arm, right? Let's see you move it. And there he goes. He thought about it, and he lifted his arm up. Lifted his arm up. Sort of let it fall. Right? He says, okay. Can you inhale? And I says, well, exhale. And good. Inhale. Good. So he could breathe to cue, right? And then I said, now inhale while you're raising your arm. And to me, the experience came full force right into that person that could barely move, right in the first few minutes of his lesson. The little bell or putting a sticker on your shoulder of accomplishing the experience of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. My point is, happened in such a limited way. But in doing that, it kindled something in his eyes, of course, because it gave him acknowledgement of not only that he could control two things, but that he could coordinate them as well. And in, I think, expressing more of his capacity in observing, had more of a sense of self, regardless of the body that it was housed in. Okay? So, you have to know who you're teaching, though, and at what level before you start directing how something happens in breathing. At first, there's no attention paid to it, and then in the middle stage, there's a lot of attention paid to the timing of it, but so much that in the third stage, you don't have to think about it because subconsciously, you're connected to how your breathing influences your movement and anticipates your movement. Okay? That was a lot, went by in a hurry. So in that regard, in breathing, with MMP, the deal with MMP is that spirit is observing, and that observing is capacity, like thinking and being. And as an instructor, when you call upon your students' participation in those capacities to accomplish the movement, it may be simple and it may be too limited or too narrow, but to me that's the purest experience that you're there to deliver as an instructor. That experience in your student of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And if the person was a quadriplegic and couldn't talk, just explaining to them what you know about how things work, or how you teach, or how you feel about the method, though I don't think that's as good as empowering the thinking of someone that can't do anything more than thinking, right? And empowering the movement of someone that can't do anything or much more than move. The three ingredients, the three capacities you have as an instructor, or body, mind, and spirit, that you're trying to coordinate as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. Breathing allows you to direct your students, the timing of your student's breath, in coordination with some other intent or movement. So, breathing means, I misread my notes. Breathing is a means to uniform engagement of the body, muscles, uniformly engaged. Because the act of breathing creates tension in the upper body that is connected from the ribs to the buttocks, through the transverse, if you want to get picky. What's key is that the act of breathing has two dimensions to it, and in the inhalation, the tension that comes from the inhalation, this is MMP's point of view, the inhalation acts to further distribute the load of the body. It's part of the overall dynamic tension in the body. Coming a long time ago from a martial arts background into Pilates, I was so sure that the exhale was the strongest side of the breath, because in doing a sequence of movements in martial arts, there are pinnacles of performance in that you usually exhale loudly and completely and make a sound. Kia. The whole intent of those movements and that sound, to me, is like expiration. It's the expiration of something. Okay. And so, yes, you are strong on an expiration, and you also are concentric in your nature, I think, right? Towards center, towards center. But the inhale distributes load, it makes you lighter in space, and moves from the expiration status of being dead into the impulse of life that presses breath to happen. So, uniform first. I'm getting ahead of myself. And I want to save some of this for Facebook as well. It means to uniform. So, in doing the swan on the ladder barrel, who knows how that happens anymore, but from a bent knee, you're prone on the barrel with your feet Pilates V on one of the rungs, with knees bent, and at some point in the pattern, you're taking the weight of your body and your arms, in my world, out to straight, and then making a lift back into extension. Okay. And this is one of the best places I can try to make it sensational, how different it is if the body is exhaling in a load, lifting the load of their body on an exhale, versus lifting the load of their body on an inhale. Because your inhale, my inhale, on the swan on the ladder barrel, takes me out into a straight line, arms in line with body. And the inhale really doesn't peak until after the initiation of the extension. because that's where you want all your strength and your load to be most evenly distributed, is when you're furthest away from center and about to change direction in your effort, because you can't go any further away from center than that. So it's in that critical translation, is the word that I would use, where a direction of movement changes from one direction markedly to another. Coordination on the reformer is a good example of translation. You go out long and then you translate wide, 90 degrees. Okay, I'm getting off the subject of breathing. So, to get to uniform usage in your body, you have to control your breathing. And even though in the beginning, to gain control of your core, see, which exercises you learn in which order is different than what order you end up doing them in, because of the capability you develop in some reasonable progression that then allows you to alter the order of doing them, because you own them in a bigger context. So, moving on. Constricted breathing. Constricted breathing comes from musculature somewhere in the mouth, the lips, or the throat, right? That's engaged. Muscularity that's engaged, that somehow affects the free flow of air in and out. If you're really coming from your core, right, that engagement, and you're connected. If you have the connection of shoulders as well, your breathing is this delicious connection, this dynamic tension between ribs and buttocks, between your hip axis and your shoulder axis. And the only thing that breathing is doing, that the organism is doing, is breathing. So, breathing with your mouth closed is a hindrance to the free flow of air in and out. Michael Miller Pilates, Michael Miller point of view. Just within that point of view, you know, whatever you think as a yogi or some other Pilates person or a martial artist or a dancer or an acrobat, right? Just keep remembering that it's not, for me, I tell myself, and it helps me realize that all I'm trying to do is clarify a point of view. Pursed lips. Anything pursed lips, and you hear the sound of the air, all of that is a distraction from and a short circuit of the kind of energy you want connected in your body to allow your body to breathe freely without constriction. So no noise and no percussion. I mean, no noise other than the free flow of air going in and out. So there I could comment. See, when I see great Pilates being performed, especially if I'm lucky enough to be in the presence of that energy, right, all I see is breathing. I mean, the body does all these wonderful things around this function of breathing. So when you talk about breathing into your mid-back, you know, that's muscularly, a student that comes to Pilates has so much to discover about what they're capable of doing, and by doing I mean the the, the capability of their muscular engagement, and how they play one part of muscular engagement off of another. And in terms of breathing into your mid-back, as soon as you get the realization how the ribs really do have to come down and connect into the rotation at the core, right? The ribs are an umbrella of tension. They're on an outside cafe restaurant. When the awning comes down and you see somebody rolling the awning down, the rib cage is an awning of tension. And with a drum head called a diaphragm, right? And how all that works, with an MMP, or however you start out breathing, for whatever reason you use that breath, right? Ultimately I think you end up with wanting your breathing not to be an artificial device, but an unencumbered expression. And then finally there's some backup noise. I can't think straight without hearing something about to back up and run me over. It comes from causality. That back beep 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 backup noise comes from a communication that something's happening that you better be aware of, right? And so as a Pilates instructor, you can be very effective if you actually implement causality in your instructions. And causality can be as simple as 3 words. Exhale to prepare. Because you're telling someone to exhale, and it's in the anticipation of whatever is to come. See, and this is breathing. It's the key thing about breathing, I hope I can get across, is that breathing happens whether you like it or not. It's an autonomic reflex, which is a big hint about being human, in that I was born, and there was no manual, and there was no sign-up sheet, and being born into life is like recognizing that you are breathing due to something that's automatically happening within you. A response to the reality that says, keep breathing, right? So it's a bit afield. Exhale to prepare. I say a lot because I want to then say, I then want to say, depends on where we are in this, but I want to introduce causality. Say on the roll-up, as you inhale, arms point straight up, curl around your ears, to lift your head up and stop. Open your mouth. See, I want to set up the free airway, the relaxed throat, and I already have set up soft knees bent, pressing through the heels so the end points of ankles and knees are in place. So I can say, squeeze your inner thighs together to cause your exhale. And then they get up as far as they're going to get up, and then they roll down. But the causality of, and I like a brick, meaning rather than a ball, rather than a soft, spongy ball, I like a brick because it's easier to have a consequence on the squeeze if it's more rigid. But really, causality, step into another league of instruction when you actually start saying, do this to have this happen. Because why? Because it's just like, inhale to lift your arm. Right? It's do this and this in an order. You're establishing a sequence. And you're pitching that instruction to a student that has to listen to the first thing and get a sense of the first thing, like a jump rope, in order then to actually enter into the rope and jump. So this ends up acknowledging that breathing happens over time. It's ing. And that it's cyclical, meaning I don't know which way this looks to you, but I like to think of from the bottom, inhaling from toward my left up to the top, and down on my right to the center. But it's inhale up and exhale down. And while I'm drawing in space, the trick on a reformer is easy to go inhale out and exhale home, inhale out and exhale home, right? But to me, the target is to have your inhale take you out in this kind of time frame, and your exhale take you home, so that the carriage has gone out and in, but your breath has made a complete cycle. Okay? And like I say, it happens in 3 parts, right? There's the first part, the second part, and the third part. In the first part, you're not connected to breath, and the student isn't, and if you try to over-connect them and have them connect to something that is too much, you're not helping your student. So this is an expression I use, not a pie like this, but you're on the reformer, and it's like this. What does that mean? It's like, go out and in. Just like Bruce Lee sparring with Chuck Norris. Who both were brilliant. But it seemed to me that in the sparring, Bruce provoked in order to get some kind of reaction that he could respond to. Okay? That came out pretty good. And in so doing, allowed himself to respond to that rather than trying to originate something on his own. Alright, so hold on, fly fishing. Before I leave this comment, and I talked about no connection, a lot of connection, and no connection. If someone's advanced, or they can inhale out and exhale home, and it's beautiful, right? Then I would take it into, now make your inhale last as big a cycle as it can last, and disconnect it from the out and in of the reformer. Right? And what does that do? More listening. A conflicting hand signal there. Fly fishing. So in the short box, round back or flat back or any of those where you're tilting off of a lever and returning, we've already covered why you inhale, moving away from center because you're heavier and it helps you bear the weight more uniformly. But the timing, see, the timing is Because, okay, and that's why I was headed there in terms of talking about breathing being something that happens over time. And so we're caught in a time continuum. And in that time continuum, how you line up your breathing to your effort affects how strong you are. How you line up your breathing relative to where you are, or relative to where you try to take on load and loading, affects how strong you are. F, G, E, F. Fly fishing analogy is that in taking on the load in short box, flat back, right? Your exhale begins before the end of your range. So that in your wrist you change direction of the line before the fly gets all the way to where it's going. End of range. Okay? I'll never deliver it this good a second time, so the Facebookers are going to, well, we'll see. Maybe I'll make a good synthesis of this. So when it comes to fly fishing and timing when you breathe to how you move, that's totally the on-ramp to empowering a student to listen to their own cycle of breath and coordinate their breathing with their loading. I want to mention the bottom lift on the reformer in neutral spine, which is the target anyway. Because as I see it, the whole progression of the reformer is just like the progression of the mat. And you end up standing up. And there's knee stretches running bottom lift as the fundamental Pilates exercises that end the reformer workout. That's MMP, that's just that point of view. So if you remember knee stretches running bottom lift, then wherever you are in a reformer workout, if you've run out of time or you realize you need to come to some kind of conclusion, one alternative is the standard ending in any level of reformer workout, roughly speaking, is knee stretches running bottom lift. Okay. In the bottom lift, in neutral spine, it's meant to challenge your ability to control the position of your body and then of your spine, of your pelvis and of your skeleton. It's meant to help you hold neutral spine in space so that you're connected to it when you stand up. In the bottom lift, you can go out and come in on a breath. Inhale out, exhale home. Or you can hold your breath. Or you can exhale out and inhale if you think that works for you. When it comes to the timing of things and the fly fishing, there are times when you start your exhale or your inhale sooner than your expression of your range of motion. To have more control. It's all about control, right? Now with the bottom lift, neutral spine on the reformer, the inhale takes you out, and the carriage starts returning, right? And the whole point of the delay of the exhale is to try to go deeper into the grip at the hips. if ever there was an exercise meant to challenge or focus your ability to make as tight a grip as you can, not a clinch, just meaning how close your grip is to the thing you're trying to rotate around, the axis. Is it a big grip, or is it a small, comfortable grip that you have a lot of control with? I use breathing when I think about it, and I usually do. On the return of the bottom lift, I start returning in the effort, but that effort of returning draws me that much deeper into my abdominal area, which I'm talking or referring to as a grip at the hips. So, I can't believe I've talked all this much about breathing and haven't mentioned the inhale bus. And my example is this, of being a child and seeing water go down a gutter or, somewhere, water running off from somewhere. And I'm there and I see this flow, a flow of water and flow of breath. See how this is coming together? But in observing the flow, is that enough? And it seems that it's human nature to want to reach out and interact with what's observed, or influence it, right? Control it. So just putting your hand out in the water to affect the flow is as human as it gets in terms of interacting with its environment. When I say inhale to prepare, or exhale to prepare, what am I preparing for? And so this I got up early today to make sure I had enough time to talk about this subject. This comes back to recognizing that contrology is about control, and we're trying to control ourselves so that we can survive, and to survive we acknowledge reality, and the reality that we wake up to puts us behind a steering wheel in a vehicle that's in motion. It's my latest metaphor, right? And so it's sort of like we're alive whether we like it or not, and what we're after is control, because so much seems to be outside of our control, and the more that we can control ourselves and our reaction to our experience, the more likely we are to survive. Right? Recognizing that we are in process, that we are alive, and that some of, or maybe most of, what keeps us alive, we don't have to think about. It's autonomic, it's automatic. Right? And breathing is sort of one of those things where this is the beauty, and talk about the main on-ramp, the human being, and throughout all kinds of expressions in human culture, be it religious or yogic or tantric or anything that makes a big deal out of breathing, right? All that lead up, and then what? It's easy to go right in and say, hold your breath. Hold your breath. Today we're going to control our breathing, and we're just not going to breathe for the hour. Right? I mean, knock on the incredible or the impossible to gain focus on the fact that you need to breathe in. And then that intellectually, what you can do with your mind is put your hand in the stream. You can completely exhale and be continuing your effort to exhale long after the air, if any, is gone. So there's a difference between the air and the effort. In the spine stretch on the mat, you reach out, expunging air, and you continue that reach until when? And see, I didn't even think of this about the presentation. I got to, when you need air. Repeat after me. Repeat after me. When you need air. When you need air. So you're teaching when you need air. A big group. A really big group. And you're in the spine stretch, or actually before then, really. You can just say to somebody, now when I asked you a question about when you breathe in, here's your answer. And you tell them when you need air. Right? Because what you want them focused on is when they need the air. You want them listening for the biological communication, the impulse to breathe in. And then there's this very subtle shift for me in my effort where I try to go a little bit deeper in what I'm doing, as though I'm trying to loosen my ability to let go. I make an effort into what I let go from. It's a very small thing. It's not a big thing. But it's there's this engagement of exhale wherever. And it's like there's this final effort into the engagement that then becomes the release into the need to breathe in. All right? So there is a synchronization of transfer. First of all, it's intellectually delayed. Your mind is saying, keep reaching, keep reaching, keep reaching, and wait until when? Until you need air. And then when you need air, see, it's Bruce Lee getting something to respond to. You get to respond to that need that comes from within you for the air to move. And it's my experience that the body will do anything it has to in order to get air. Anything that it can in order to get air. Because it's a survival thing. And so when you're in your effort waiting for the inhale bus, right? Again, it's huge listening for your student to go into their cave and listen to the sensation of autonomic reaction. And then it's all about breathing. It's easy to say that. It's tough to explain what all that means. But, geez. I had a very fit student who said, Michael, I can hold my breath for a long time. I said, okay. And I took it in stride, and then my instructions changed to, okay, now turn over and start doing push-ups. Because I think we were doing spine stretch. Let's say that. We were doing spine stretch, and I'm saying reach, and he's saying, Mike, I could be out there forever. I said, okay. So I turned him over and started doing push-ups. Why? Because that would make the heart beat, and the heartbeat needs air to beat with. The heart needs oxygen to beat with, so it needs fuel, right? So I immediately put him into something that would cause his heart rate to increase to where he needed fuel quicker than just sitting there talking about doing the spine stretch. And so after he did about 100 or 150 push-ups, because whichever, but I wanted to make sure he was respiratorily in need. And then turned him around, sat him down, put his arms out, says, okay, exhale, and he's already going, and exhale, reach out now, make a good reach, and only come up when you need the air. And so he went out, man, came right back up because he needed the air. And so this ringing of a sponge, this internal shower of doing Pilates, so much of it is the energy you're burning in your respiration. And that you don't do the mat work in this end of every cycle waiting until you need air, because you need air the whole time. And so it's a matter of your complete exhale being led by the need to breathe in. And so this is another simile where it's like dancing. And in some dancing, and partners dancing, ballroom kind of dancing, one partner usually leads. And in doing Pilates, it's the breathing that leads the movement. The two dancers are breathing and movement, if you will. And the movement doesn't happen, and the breath compensates or breathes in order to facilitate the movement that's already happening. So breathing is about having your back up against your own humanity as a human being. And the more you completely oxygenate yourself as you work out, the more that sensation floods your body, right? Breathing when you need air. Oh, and I talked about that. Okay. So I had already talked about waking up behind the wheel. See, we find ourselves human beings and biological in nature in a world of physics, in reality. And part of that reality is the flow of breath and the necessity of that flow to sustain life. It's a survival thing. I know I've heard and dealt with and I acknowledge all the other ways to look at breathing, for all the other reasons there are to breathe that way. Hopefully I'm just giving you a take on breathing within the point of view of Michael Miller Pilates, with an understanding of core new tension, right? Because see, it's when you get enough flexibility in the ribs and a connection in your transverse to pull your rib cage down against the rise of the diaphragm. And see, in the shoulders, right? In the shoulders. There'll have to be another time to broadcast about this. But I covered most of what I wanted to talk about. And that in our bodies, my point is, our DNA is in the struggle to survive. It's in its replication at that chemistry level, that the real struggle to survive is going on. It's one point of view. And here we are as human beings, as an expression of that fight to survive at that level. And in recognizing that we are a stage of this flow, recognizing what it is and how it works and how we can manipulate it into stronger, more beautiful movement that comes from a place of the organic need to breathe in. So our bodies are already in motion, and it's up to us to survive by reacting to what we observe. And if you're not observing, life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, add two and two, direct your thinking, Geist